Test, 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 test. All right, so I'm going to do my best with this particular live stream series, right? This is going to be kind of an, for now, unending series of live streams that I do about this organization known as, quote, the family. And I want to, I think first from the beginning, sort of provide just a little bit of context in that, I don't really prefer to be doing this, if I'm being honest. I don't really want to talk about it, but I don't really have a choice at the same time, and that's part of where it's a little bit complicated, right? This live stream, in a way, it's the presentation of, well, the results of my investigation to some extent, but it's also sort of a dynamic addressing of this organization's behavior to some extent, and that's part of what's really challenging, from the beginning, is that this organization, if you start learning about, quote, the family, and what they really are, you begin to realize from the very start there's something sort of lurking underneath the surface. And that's what I think, for me, from, the very, first time that I heard about the organization, right? I kind of was, trying to wrap my brain around, like, what is this even, right? What is this about? And honestly, that's one of those things for me that it causes me to what? To research. You know what I mean? To research. The very first thing that I'm going to do if I hear of something in our world that I don't completely understand, that, to me it just, do you want to say it raises maybe a red flag? I'll be honest, I kind of, it did raise a red flag from the very beginning of hearing about this organization. And what was that flag? Well, I mean, to start, even just the name, to me, I was like, wow, the family. I'll be frank with you, y'all. I'm someone that, it's kind of weird to say it this way. I'm part of this brand to some extent. I was trying to help people. Well, I've called it what it is, right? Which is humble encouragement, and that's true. I've also called it a recursive sort of concept to help deal with propaganda and misinformation. And so what does that mean? Well, it was kind of an antidote for polarization, right? And there's one way to phrase it with VOYiiGUR. It's an antidote for polarization. What do I mean? I mean that I'm an apolitical anti-radical, right? Don't get too caught up on the terms, because really words are just words, right? But even just that term, apolitical, is sort of what matters the most, is that, well, I look at things through a lens which is genuinely apolitical, and in this day and age, that's not just kind of rare to find. It's actually almost so uncommon that some people can't really understand what it means anymore to actually be apolitical. And see, I was conscious of that, and that's part of why I built what I built, because I was concerned that there was such a lack of apoliticism in our world. Don't get me wrong, having your personal, opinions in politics is totally anyone's right. But I think the difficulty that I had from the beginning of forming any political perspective was that I was seeing, polarization in the United States, a lot of political polarization. And I was wondering, where is this coming from? How is it happening? And, before I really, started researching the organization known as the family, I already had some kind of deep-seated concerns about just what I was seeing on the internet, what I was seeing in statements, what I was seeing in the psychology of folks out there. The group psychology is a really important term, right? because when it comes down to it, there is sort of, individual psychology, right? And of course, with that, there's the sort of well connected different fields, right? We have psychiatry, we have, mental health care is really, another way to say that, right? And then also, and I'm not saying they're the exact same thing, please don't get too caught up on my words, right? But psychology, psychiatry are technically, there's some differences between the two. We're using just words, right? If we're going to get caught up on words. Group psychology, for example, it's kind of important to remember that, you're kind of looking at things in a different way. Because why? You're understanding, the way that people and their psychology influence the psychology of others, in my opinion, right? We could pull up terms, but that's where I want to emphasize that, am I trying to be completely everything, dictionary definition perfect? No. Actually, that's one of the things I want to point out from the beginning, y'all, and it's part of the reason that maybe some people don't even understand how it is possible to actually be apolitical in this day and age. Is that, what does it mean to be apolitical? In my opinion, polarization means that we are what? We're polarized, right? We're divided, right? I think about things kind of, computers is like my whole background, right? I've mentioned before there's some symbolism in this name, right? It's like my two main passions in life have been technology and psychology, right? So it's like, okay, I'm looking at the psychology and how it's involved with the technology, right? How we're sharing information, sharing ideas, who is sharing what and saying what, how are people interpreting that, right? I mentioned to people, like, I'll be honest, I'm not really into conspiracy theories very much at all, but I do enjoy hearing, and actually, maybe it's not just an enjoyment. I'll be honest, I kind of need information from people. Well, what's the psychology around the conspiracies that you are willing to believe or not believe, right? And for me, it's always been very directly relevant and important to understand the reasoning of others, the lens that others are applying in their lives, if we are going to be able to understand, some of the big picture, concepts that we have to kind of deal with in our lives and in our world every single day, right? So I want to start with, I've got to say that this stream is, quite frankly, kind of a one-way stream. I don't really expect people to join. I'm not really hoping that they do. I don't really care if they do, to be clear, but it's really, and I've got it in the title here, right? It's a one-way live stream. That's how it's going to be for now. I'm not even going to go into detail about why in this recording, but when I think about our beautiful world, and it is beautiful, y'all. Let's be honest. Look at that. This is okay, wait a minute. We're not actually looking at the world. I'm just going to let anybody know. When you're zooming in and out on Google Earth and you're spinning around, you're not technically streaming, from a spaceship, y'all. Just to let you know. What are we looking at here? This is, it's technically, it's a representation, right? It's a representation of the planet Earth. Let's be clear, y'all. We don't want to get too, technical or caught up on, anything, to a ridiculous degree now, do we? But no, it's fake, quote, right? Oh, but wow, it looks so real sometimes. Wow, look at that water. That looks pretty real, y'all. That's kind of cool. I'm gonna be honest. What is it? That's actually kind of a good place to start, y'all. Is Google Earth real? And this is no, pandering to, and it's no insult to Google in any way, shape, or form, y'all. I'm serious when I say it, right? It's like, it's a piece of technology, all right? It's the shortest way to say it, right? I'm not trying to diminish. It's a really impressive piece of technology, in my opinion, y'all. It's like amazing. You basically can fly around the planet Earth like virtually, right? And like, wow, it's all browser based, right? To me, that's kind of like extra impressive. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I don't even need to install a client to run this, right? It's like, Brave basically runs off of the Chromium backend, right? Which is Google's open source sort of, engine behind Chrome, right? And so then in some ways it's like, okay, I'm using a browser that's like plays pretty well with their tech, right? But I will say that, it is impressive, right? Like, even the stars in the background here, like, it's really impressive, but it's not technically what? It's not technically real. It is sort of an abstract representation of something that, even though we're applying a lot of very real technology, it's still what? Is it, quote, fake? In my opinion, kind of no. We wouldn't call this fake, would we? That looks really kind of real. Even though it's fake in that it's on a computer screen, right? But it's, what is it? It's a facade in a sense, right? And at least in its shortest, in the briefest way I'd like to put it for this, in this context, I would say that you could say it's a facade. Could we say that? And here's part of what I mean, y'all. Let me see. Let's see. If we go to maps, does it let us inspect, right? If we go to inspect, right, and I'll be honest, y'all have to remember the hotkey for pulling this up, right? What are we looking at here, right? We can actually go look at, what do we kind of call this, right? I'll be honest, y'all, for anybody, that's educated, this is kind of like not a big deal. And I'm not trying to be mean or condescending or act smart, because I'm not, but what I'm saying is like, well, every single web page on the internet, right, you can look at the back end is what we call this. And again, I'm not trying to get caught up in terms. You're looking at the source code in a way, but it's not really even necessarily just the source code, to be clear, y'all, because, well, especially in big web applications like Google Maps, there's so much depth and detail here. We've got references to different scripts, pieces of code, essentially, right? And it depends, right? I am oversimplifying. I'm kind of applying Occam's razor here, right? This is an oversimplification, but part of what I'm bringing attention to, right, is that we can inspect in Google Earth here as well, and really we can do the exact same thing, right? And it's like, wow, okay, wait, no, go back. It looks so simple. There we go, beautiful. Look at that, y'all. Okay, look, this is everything. We have head and then body, and okay, that's it. Look how easy it is. If you wanted to write this on your own, that's all you would need to know, right, everyone? No, okay, well, okay, then we zoom out. We have this concept in computer science. Really, it can be referred to as, well, information hiding. You understand? We're actually using data structures and different concepts in in the way that we're organizing a lot of this to hide information. And why would we do that? Well, because we're not trying to be sneaky. Let's be clear. Google's not being, you're not trying to pull one over on us, y'all, with this. I'm just going to let you know. I don't mean to spoil, where I'm going. But no, I'm trying to bring everyone's attention to the fact that, like, yes, this is a facade. Right? And when we want to look a little bit deeper, then we do what? We inspect, right? We just right clicked and we hit inspect. And then now we're looking at the source code and we're kind of like, okay, what's really going on here? All right, now we're seeing some hexadecimal, right? We're seeing light theme background color. That must mean something, I was like, wow, look how much detail. It's so amazing. Wow. No, we're not going to have too much fun, I promise, y'all. I mean, this is part of what's difficult to me is that, in inspecting anything, right? To be frank with you, Google doesn't care at all if I right click and I click inspect on this, right? There's nothing secret here. They're not hiding anything. But let's say, to be honest, right, it's a different story, for people to hack things or break into things, right? They're, quote, inspecting in a way which we would consider to be what, right? This is not hacking. Google is sending you this code. That's actually what your browser is running locally right here, right? Let's all be on the same page about that. We can pull up some different tools that are built into, the browser to help us. A lot of people that develop web or front end, even, full stack at times, they're going to pull up a lot of these tools here, and they're looking at different parts of the page to make sure that they're running correctly. They might be building a new feature or service in which they need some more information based upon, what's going on here, right? And, again, we could go in an immense amount more detail there, but that's one of the things that I think is always notable about technology, right? I want to bring everyone's attention then to this, which is a huge, important concept in computer science, OSI model. There's so many layers to all of this, and what are we looking at? It's something like what we were just looking at. We're kind of looking at, the very top layer in a way, and then we're starting to go down, right? But the thing is, we're not going down, past, we're just looking at the code that's being delivered to our browser. It's kind of the simplest way to say it, right? There's a server that's providing that code. And at the end of the day, quite frankly, why am I saying it's a facade? Well, because everything in life is a facade to some extent, right? And then it just works. It's just magic. It's just like a beautiful globe. It looks so real, right? I've mentioned before that, to be honest, when I saw the normal globes of the planet Earth in school or in, museums and stuff like that, I was always fascinated. It's so cool, our whole planet. But I'm not somebody, let me emphasize, I'm not a globalist in any way, shape, or form, all right? I'm a native U.S. citizen. Yeah, I really do mean this from the bottom of my heart, y'all. It's like trying to be upfront. My loyalty is to the United States first and foremost. It always has been, it always will be, and I'll be honest with you, that is completely irrefutable. But that being said, I am someone who has always said, well, I would like that we sort of remember that we're all on this one planet together, right? team human being. And so I think that's kind of what's a little bit, difficult when I start investigating an organization like the family, because I think that, in all fairness, trying to be empathetic to members of this organization, they wanted to see something that was international. They wanted to see something that was, well, kind of divine, if I need to put it that way, right? That was kind of like a grander purpose. And I can understand some of the psychology behind that reasoning. I think the difficulty for me is I'm the kind of person, this is, I don't really want to talk about, a lot. My father was a science teacher my whole life. I was always really interested in science, and I asked a lot of questions. And I'll be honest, my mom used to get mad at me because I used to always ask before I asked a question. I would say, "Can I ask a question?" And she'd be like, "Yes." And because she would, you know what I'm saying? She's like, "No, just ask the question instead of asking me if you can ask a question again." I was like, "No, I don't want to upset you. If you don't want me to ask a question, then say no." Right? That's the reason I'm asking if I can ask a question, right? And she's like, "Okay, oh yes, you can ask a question. What's the question?" It's like, "Why does gravity work?" It's like, "Oh, okay." That's kind of like the more, difficult question to answer in brief, right? It's like we may not even completely understand the answer altogether. We're getting into some really serious physics there, right? It's like, but again, part of what is complicated to me is that, I mean it. My whole life, I've asked a lot of questions, and I don't like that. In my opinion, it's one of the things about faith that's really important. So my father was a science teacher my whole life, and he was always reminding me, you can love science and be a Christian. Those things are not in any way, at odds with one another. Science and Christianity are not, it's not the scientists against the Christians. How else do I need to put it? It's not, science versus Christianity. Like, for me, it's actually really one of those things in my whole life. Like, I was born and raised a Christian, right? I was, dedicated in a church in Pennsylvania, a church in Delaware, the Presbyterian church, right? I was baptized again. I accepted the Lord again when I moved down to Texas. And, to be honest with you, it's kind of like interesting in a way, almost just like looking back at my life, how, I remember when I was starting to even begin, and this is, I want to be honest about this. I didn't really want to form opinions about politics. When I started looking at the politics out there in our country at the time, which let's say everyone has their quote politics that they sort of, well, let's be honest, can we all agree that to some extent you kind of receive some of your politics at some point in life, right? You're kind of like, you're told this is how it goes, and then you listen, and then, I'm not saying you just cast that away, that's for darn sure, right? But everyone has their own journey with when they start forming their own perspective. That's kind of the best way for me to say it, right? And I guess what I mean to say is that, well, I never for a moment have ever been someone that's rebellious or someone that is, I just want to pick different political opinions for the sake of having different opinions. That's what's kind of weird to me is that, in this day and age, it's almost an act of rebellion to be apolitical, actually. It's almost an act of rebellion to be apolitical, right? To be, well, kind of in the middle, in between. Like, how do you even be apolitical in a world that is becoming more and more polarized? You're either a 1 or a 0, right? And this is no comment on either political party or partisan side, right, y'all? What I'm saying is that, well, that's kind of the thing. I've always, personally, I think it's better for us to try to see things more in a series of spectrums. And this has nothing to do, I am on the autism spectrum, right? But this has nothing to do with that. I'm just gonna say it, right? I'm an adult that unfortunately, like, that's just not happened. It's not been diagnosed in my lifetime. That's very common, like, in case anybody did not know. That's extremely common. That is not even like a little bit maybe uncommon. There's a lot of adults out there today, And it's not my personal opinion, right? I'm not trying to tell anyone that they are autistic, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of adults out there today, which maybe they've not become conscious of it yet, or it just hasn't been a big deal, right? But they're on the autism spectrum, and it just has not been diagnosed on paper. See, the thing is, that's how so many people in my life could have never known, right? Because honestly, in a lot of ways, it does not matter. It actually does not matter in a lot of ways. It's almost like it doesn't matter at all until someone really like forces it to matter. And in this case, well, it's complicated. But I guess, part of what's complicated for me is that, well, that doesn't really matter. My whole life, I've been someone to investigate. Investigate, right? In my opinion, when you say the word research, what are you also really doing? You're investigating, right? Just like we right-clicked. Were we doing research right here? Well, I wouldn't say so like most people consider like academic research. Were we now? That's not exactly, the same. But in a way, technically the term does sort of kind of arguably apply, right? We're researching into the source code of the Google Earth, web page. For me, I think the word investigate, it's just a word. It's a word that can even mean taking information and really thinking over it and kind of pulling together a lot of different strings is one way that I could say it. And for me, that's where it's kind of a challenge because I guess I don't mean a challenge like I enjoy it necessarily, but I mean that I really am someone that I've always had sort of, well, I kind of remind myself, okay, big picture perspective. What does that mean? There's a lot of different ways we could talk about the big picture perspective. This is something I'm going to live stream about on its own, completely separate on other occasions, right? These clips, a lot of them are not going to be super long. Some of them might be, up to an hour or so. But really, what I'm doing is I'm putting out there in the world a lot of information that's kind of been in my brain. It's not mental illness. It's not, it's not incorrect if I want to put it that way because, well, part of what I'm doing is I'm kind of just laying it out there. Okay, how do I know what I know? Where does it come from? And a lot of different stuff like that, right? So let's pull up some information really quick. Now, the first thing for me that's difficult, right? Encyclopedia Britannica, I just want to ask, does anybody consider Encyclopedia Britannica to be a biased, liberal news media source in any way, shape, or form? Like, I'm not trying to be political, right? That's my point, y'all. It's like, I'm just asking the question honestly. It's like, does anybody consider, it's like, wait a minute, they've got some, they're just propaganda. Like, does anybody feel that way? Honest to God question. I'm just going to ask openly. Does anybody feel that way? Well, honestly, y'all, that's the thing. We could argue about that kind of stuff. But from the beginning, I just want to say very plainly that this is kind of my thoughts on this organization and part of why it really is important for us to remember. This is not a governmental organization, y'all. Anybody that's under the impression that the family is some kind of governmental organization, that's part of my concern, if I'm being honest, y'all, is that they sort of want people to believe that. This is kind of part of what got me looking at them in the first place, if I'm being honest, y'all, is that, well, they really want to sort of deceive people into believing that they are like a governmental organization, right? And they really do, I'll be honest, they kind of work quite diligently to put up that perception, but they're not a governmental organization. Just to emphasize, this is part of the reason why I need everyone, even word of mouth, to understand this organization is not what it presents itself as. And, to be frank with you, it concerns me how many people have looked at this as something that they believe is kind of like the secret shell, like the secret secure shell, right? This is a concept I'm going to come back to because for me, it's very, very relevant. SSH is bread and butter in my job. And what does SSH stand for? It stands for secure shell, literally it does. And so, to be honest with you, y'all, like, they have treated the family like it's their secure shell, but they want to put up this reputation to other people like it's the secure shell of, well, the U.S. government, when, well, this is the problem from the beginning, y'all, is that, well, this is not a U.S. government organization. This is an international organization. Even if we argue about some of the other terms involved here, we know for an absolute fact that this is an international organization, number one. And number two, this is probably the main first thing that's always been so misleading to me, y'all, is that they are very upfront about the fact that even though in their name, right, they used to kind of call themselves things like the National Committee for Christian Leadership, right, they're not actually a Christian group. And why is that? Well, they openly, embrace. A lot of their members are from Islam. A lot of their members are, they're Jewish, right? And there's nothing wrong with, in my opinion, this is part of what's complicated, right? The nuance, right? I'm saying the big picture perspective, okay? The nuance is that, well, you can choose whatever religion you personally want, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to have your personal religion, and I mean it, y'all. But this is actually what's kind of difficult for me, because I don't like to say bad things about anybody. I think part of what's difficult is that, well, Scripture tells us, as someone that's born and raised a Christian, Scripture tells us that, well, no, we're not supposed to be really sharing, especially the way that they do, with other religions, right? And I'm not trying to be exclusionary or mean when I say that. What I'm saying is that was just, talk about red flags. When I'm seeing that this organization is presenting themselves as something that kind of wants to act like it's a secure shell, even though I'm kind of skeptical already of that, right? And I'm like, well, they're kind of putting up this front. What's the word for that? Like a facade, right? That's one of the most important words here. They're putting up a facade, like they are what? Like some kind of governmental organization, right? And you can kind of see that they're not in reality, right? And so, there's kind of this challenge then to me of, well, put on my inspector detector ears, right? This is just a cute little fennel fox, y'all, to represent, I mean it, right? It's like, okay, listen up. I'm listening. I'm now, right? It's in my ears. They're perked up, right? It's no weird cryptic hint of anything, right? I just put my little, dumb symbol, right? It's like, I mean it, y'all. It's like, it's a fennel fox. I thought it was cute. And it is cute, in my opinion, personally. But anyway, so really though, it's like, okay, now I'm listening intently, right? I'm kind of like, okay, I heard about this thing called The Family, and where did I hear about it? Well, initially, I'd heard of it in passing before this documentary on Netflix, right? I'm not gonna go, pull that up right now at this moment. I'd heard of it in passing before this documentary on Netflix, and the truth is, sorry, I've got an alarm going off. The truth is that I never really, how do I put this best? When I watched the documentary, it was kind of just like, wow, it's the main thing, honestly, that stuck out to me about the documentary. It was notable, whatever you want to say. It's a really good piece of journalism, let me put it that way. But it is also just like lacking information. And it's no criticism of Netflix, y'all. Speaking of, that's right. So how many people have criticized Netflix? It's like, I watched this whole documentary, and I'm like, man, there's like a lot kind of like on the outside here, but like everybody they interview is even saying like, yeah, we really don't talk about this. Nobody talks about this. Everybody keeps saying like, nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about this. No one talks about this. We just, we all, and then this is a problem. I'll be honest, y'all, they kind of, a little bit more than a little bit, right? They put up this kind of perception like, no, we just enjoy our privacy. Well, I'll be honest, y'all, that's the thing. I just enjoy my privacy for very good reasons, just like anybody else. I'm someone who just values my privacy personally, right? But this organization, when I hear some of the interviewees here, right, and the way that they're even phrasing some of what they're saying, I'm kind of like, wait a second. You're kind of, well, I'm not trying to be mean to this man, right? But he's kind of like, no, there's no conspiracies going on. We just, like, value our privacy. We ain't got no, like, conspiracies or nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do Google. That's the first reaction, y'all. It's like, all right, time to investigate. My ears are just like, wow, something beneath the surface here. I just need to investigate. So I'm going to do some Google searching, right? Take the big picture perspective. And right then and there, y'all, that's where I'm going to end this first clip of the live stream. And I'll be back in just a bit. Thank you very much if you did end up watching this.